Hello again, friends, and welcome to another episode of Culture Crossroads. I'm Andrew Southwick. He is R.C. Williams. She, back by popular demand, Juliana Ormond, both of Watchmen Action. And of course, they are fresh off their trip to the International Christian Film Festival. We're going to hear all about that in our Faith Focus segment. Thank you for being a part of the program today. We're going to kick off with a bang. I don't know, you guys are familiar with central bank digital currency, are you not?
A little bit, just a little bit.
We've talked about it on the show, and I know you guys are heavily, you guys do a lot of work in terms of parallel economy and parallel currency as well, getting back to gold and silver. We talked about that last week. RC, you had the interview with Daniel Diaz and Citizens for Sound Money. Well, Catherine Austin Fitts, HUD formerly, and she gave a speech at Hillsdale College back in November. I came upon this speech on YouTube, and I wanted to bring at least pieces of it to the program and get your reaction to some of these clips. Help fill in the blanks, because this is, I think, one of the most sinister slay the West operations that we have, because this really is where you could wake up one day and your money is worthless. And not only that, but you couldn't even get to it if you wanted to. Mm-hmm. And the premise that Ms. Fitts posits is that the CBDC, the central bank digital currency, is really a control mechanism. It has nothing to do with convenience, nothing to do with technology growing. It's a control mechanism, and she lays this out. So I want to bring a couple of these clips here, and they're about 1.5 minutes each, right in there. But it's important that you hear the context. And then RC and Juliana, what I'd like for you to do, you haven't seen these clips, I don't think. You may have seen it on YouTube. But I want to just get your raw reaction and some insight, because as everyday Americans, these are things that are happening. We don't even know they're going on. We don't know what they mean. We hear Bitcoin and we think of the little dollar sign on the coin, and we think of something, probably out of, some digitized Las Vegas. But we don't realize how nefarious these things are, and the potential for real harm that they could bring. So without further ado, let me bring the first clip. I want to make sure this is the right one. I believe it is. Let me bring the first clip. This is from the beginning of her talk at Hillsdale, her being Catherine Austin Fitts, and she's just explaining a little bit of giving some of the intro and some of the 30,000-foot view. So listen to this.
So we published a study in 2018 called The State of Our Currency, and it was an overview of the dollar system and what was happening in the dollar system. And one of the things we pointed out was the ability of the dollar system to extract subsidy that could, in fact, pay back or support the body politic was waning. The other thing that was happening is, as the 21 trillion had gone missing, we had failed to provide, think of that as a laundry out of our retirement funds. And as people started to retire, because you hadn't provided the money in our retirement accounts that had been promised, in fact, something had to be done. And in fact, what has been done is we are steadily lowering life expectancy and bringing lots of immigrants who put more money in the system. And that is delaying the balance of the books. So essentially what we said is the system is long in the tooth, and either the subsidy has to be cut or changed. And the danger is the central bankers will go to a system of total control, which is what is happening.
The danger is the bankers go to a system of total control. Now, she mentioned 21 trillion gone missing. In the speech, we're not going to play that clip on the show, but just so you understand where that comes from. In the speech, she talks about when they did these studies that America's national debt was at 21 trillion. And lo and behold, $21 trillion is missing. So there is a massive theft going on. Mm-hmm. She notes that the problem is not a financial problem, it's a governance problem. And I think that's something we need to take to heart. RC and Juliana, just your reaction from her setup of really what I think is if I'm understanding Ms. Fitts correctly, this is really the state of our financial affairs in America.
Andrew, Catherine Austin Fitts does such a good job with this. People should watch the full speech where she tells the story of how the 21 trillion was being sucked out and how big money players told her, look, America's lost. We're extracting as much wealth as we possibly can from America over the next 25 years before it's too late. But America, in essence, is over. This also speaks to something else that she talks about often, which is FASB 56. So FASB 56 actually allows the government to have a second set of books. And what Catherine Austin Fitts has talked about is the fact that, you know what, if you opened up that second set of books and stopped doing it, you would find the 21 trillion that was missing and the books would balance. But it's a grift operation. It's like Masters of the Grifterverse, right? And it gives the bankers cover that they need. And we've talked about it on this show and we've written about it extensively. The banking system right now, the major banks are insolvent. They have so much bad debt on their books that if they officially had to report it, Andrew, the entire world economic system would collapse overnight. And the only way to provide cover for that is to go to a centralized digital system to say, man, the banking system is unstable. It's never going to work. You're going to get wiped out. But here's the good news. We're going to make good on it one for one. With our new centralized banking digital currency, you'll be all restored, but you'll be in this digital system. And that leads to the control mechanism.
It's the same playbook that we see with Big Pharma. They create the problem, then they create what they think is the solution, which really is a catch-all for more control. You mentioned FASB 56. I have a clip where she talks about that. I wasn't going to play it, but since you mentioned it, now I'm gonna. So let's check this out. This is more from Catherine Austin Fitts, Hillsdale College, where she explains the realities of FASB 56. It's even worse than a second set of books, and you're being kind in that description. Let's check this out.
This is a completely different reset than we've ever seen, and that is because an all-digital technology, an all-digital monetary system gives you the ability to do something very radical, and I will talk about that in a minute. The other thing that happened, does everybody remember the Kavanaugh hearings? Very salacious, very entertaining, very interesting, very galvanizing. While that was happening, the Republicans and Democrats, the House and the Senate, and the executive branch agreed to something called Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board Statement 56. Doesn't that sound really boring? And what I call it FASB 56. What FASB 56 did by administrative policy is said the federal government doesn't have to obey the laws and the provisions of the Constitution related to financial management. It doesn't have to obey the financial management laws, and it doesn't have to obey the financial management regulations. Now remember, we hadn't been obeying them since 1998, or even really trying. But literally, they adopted an administrative policy that codified the financial coup that was happening. And what they said was a secret group of people, by a secret process, could take portions of the federal finances, balance sheet and income statement expenses, and take it completely dark by, again, a secret process. And if you bring in the classification laws as well and the waiver powers of the National Security Director, that not only applies to the 24 covered agencies and 100 plus commissions, panels, and other organizations of the federal government, it also applies to the big banks and defense contractors.
They carved out their own anti-constitution, unconstitutional law. And when I say they, our Congress, our senators, our congressmen, how in the world can they do that?
Well, Andrew, it's the magic, right? Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, we're a corporation. We're not a constitutional republic. And if our audience really looks at what our government's doing, you can see that they have been working as if they are a corporation, not a constitutional republic. So all the people out there need to understand that our government, it doesn't matter if it's blue or red, right or left, it does not matter. It's two wings of the same bird. We need to understand and accept the fact that everything that Catherine is saying lends us to understand the fact that they are working in cahoots with each other and they are the enemy of the people.
Andrew, so shiny object, man behind the curtain, hocus pocus,
right? Think about this now, though. Now, if you move into COVID, all of a sudden, the bank's reserve requirements go to zero. So when you put $100 in the bank can lend out all of it. They don't have to keep any in reserve. And they almost got caught with their pants down with Silicon Valley Bank. The system really got exposed. But this is a result of FASB 56 being passed. Now there are no longer any rules. So it's very easy for them to go to their banking friends and say, don't keep any in reserve. It's fine. Loan it all out. Let's do funny money. What's the worst that could happen? You end up with a pandemic.
So we're not just post Constitution as if it still exists somewhere. Our own government is actively tearing it up or trying to vote themselves or legislate themselves carve-outs for it. Now that might be a statement officially and maybe not a law, but it certainly is a loophole that they created to get around their constitutional duty. We need to see if we can get Attorney Brad Dacus back on here and ask about this. Doesn't this put in constitutional violation just about everyone? And can we not start over at that point with some of these people? Can we not get them out? In listening to this speech, and if you can find it on YouTube, it's on YouTube. Search Catherine Austin Fitts, Hillsdale College. It's from November of 2024. It's CBDC, central bank digital currency. You'll find it there. Watch the whole thing. There's a lot more than we can show you on the program. I got a couple more clips left to go here, but you need to hear this because, that was something that I learned. We've talked about FASB 56 before, but I didn't put it in the context of this is a carve out of our Constitution by people who we voted for to uphold the Constitution. There are no words. But in case that doesn't bake your biscuits, let's continue with what Ms. Fitts had to say here. And in these next two clips, I should mention, she plays video statements of people who are describing what the framework for the CBDC is. Okay, so you're going to hear it in stereo. We're going to play one, and we'll play the other. We'll respond to them both individually. Here we go.
Central bank digital, the important thing to understand about central bank digital currency in an all digital financial system is it's not a currency. It's a control grid. Now, the process to implement central bank digital currency around the world is being overseen by the Bank of International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland. And the Bank of International Settlements is owned by its members. The New York Fed and the Fed are both, the Board of Governors are both shareholders in the BIS. 63 of the top central banks are in the BIS, and they are running a process with a major partnership with the Federal Reserve to implement CBDCs, and they're prototyping around the world. In 2020, October 2020, there was a panel at the IMF on cross-border payments. Jay Powell, chairman of the Federal Reserve, was there. Augustine Carstens was there, and Augustine Carstens said the following, and I'm going to play this for you in a second, but I want you to know I was basically raised and trained to be a central banker. I was asked to be a governor of the Federal Reserve and declined. But I was raised that way, and one of the things you're raised to understand is you never, ever, you use pretzel talk. You never explain clearly what you're going to do. You talk in circles. And this was the first time I had ever seen a central banker in English explain exactly what they were planning on doing and why. And I almost fell off my chair. And if you think I almost fell off my chair, you should have seen Jay Powell's face. Okay, so here's Augustine Carstens, 57 seconds, explaining CBDCs.
Our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also, we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
So his marketing slogan for CBDC is, because we don't know who's spending what denomination and where they're spending it, this allows us to not only know that, but to control it. And what we're going to see in a further clip in a second is it's not just control, it's also control what it can be used for. That's coming up. But what do you think Americans are missing when it comes to CBDC? I mean, I really do. I think this is another example where way too many of us, are asleep at the wheel. Way too many of us are not holding our own representatives accountable who made their own carve-outs, as we just showed you, to get around the Constitution so they can pull this kind of nonsense. Whichever question resonates more. What do you think Americans are missing when it comes to the story? Or why is it that we aren't, out there with torches and pitchforks yet? Because as we talked about last week, RC, our own leaders are drowning us in a cycle of debt and devaluing our dollar while the rest of the world de-dollars by the second. It seems, I think for many people, it seems like a helpless no-win situation. But yet still, we're not in the streets. We're not with the pitchforks and torches. And I'm not advocating violence, for crying out loud. But we should be upset. This should demand, it should compel a sea change from a free people. Yet it's not. Why do you think that is?
Honestly, it's propaganda. It's what they tell the people versus what they're actually doing. For example, we're a corporation. We're not a constitutional republic, but yet they have us acting as if we're a constitutional republic. But if you look at the way they're actually acting, right, you can see that they're a corporation. People are just ignorant about what's really happening. They paint it as if it's a perfect thing. So, for example, RC and I live in the beginnings of a 15-minute city. What's a 15-minute city? It's a city where you can live, work, and play. You never have to leave. You'll get your CBDC. You'll be able to use it at certain stores in certain proximity when they say that you're able to, okay? But they're saying this 15-minute city is because of traffic, and they want to make sure that the traffic is flowing correctly. No, this is part of the agenda. But they tell you something so completely, oh, I love this idea of what you're saying, but meanwhile, they're not telling you the nefariousness behind what it is that they're actually doing. There's a lot of ignorance that are flowing. The people just don't know what's really happening behind the scenes.
Well, I think this is why we dare to talk about these things on the show. It doesn't make us popular with some of our betters, quote unquote. Sarcasm font is on there in conservative media because we don't go along to get along. We're looking for the truth wherever that leads, and we want to be honest about it. We bring it. Sometimes we don't have an answer. Sometimes it's just, hey, this is what the weather is like today, and we need to pay attention. Other times you may have some other solutions, but I mean, and I am grateful that we can be on a network like Beck that will allow us to say these things, because I do know that networks, this is the kind of stuff they bury. And this is the kind of stuff that in the previous administration, I don't think that this talk by Captain Austin Fitts would have been on YouTube. They'd have found some reason to pull it down. Let me play this last clip from her. And again, she's going to have another clip in here with another. Again, we can't say it or repeat it enough. This is something we have to figure out how to stop this. And I think a big way to stop it is voting our people out. We've got a midterm coming up in a year. We should take advantage of that opportunity. But if it's not stopped, we are going to wake up in an open air prison, whether it's a 15-minute one, a 1 hour one, or whatever it might be. Check out this last clip here from Captain Austin Fitts at Hillsdale.
So the next video, very short, is Bo Lee, used to work at the Bank of China, and now is the deputy managing director at the IMF. This was in 2023, last year. Bo Lee was talking about the programmability of money. Okay, the programmability of money. So let's watch this.
And finally, the third way we think CBDC can improve financial inclusion is through what we call programmability. That is, CBDC can allow government agencies and private sector players to program, to create smart contracts, to allow targeted policy functions. For example, welfare payment. For example, consumption coupon. For example, food stamp. By programming CBDC, those money can be precisely targeted for what kind of people can own and what kind of use this money can be utilized. For example, for food. So this potential programmability can help government agencies to precisely target their support to those people who need support. So that way can also improve financial inclusion.
By programming your money in a system where we have the cloud and lots of software and AI, I can make a different set of algorithms and rules for every person in this room. I can track you. It's the equivalent of putting, round-the-clock Stasi teams on you, but they're software bots and they're AI. And I can make up social credit rules as to how you can and cannot use your money. And if you don't accept my healthcare mandates or you don't accept my spatial restrictions, I can turn off your money.
We need to listen to these people because they're serious. This is what they want. And you remember at the top of these clips, Catherine Austin Fitts noted that the depopulation agenda also fits into this. And so we're seeing almost this perfect storm. We're seeing this plan come together, says Hannibal from the A-Team, who loves it when a plan comes together. Well, here we are. We're at this point, and you have quote unquote experts or whatever, but our own economy, I think it's past a tipping point. I think that's nonsense. We are rolling and hitting every rock on the way down the canyon here, the chasm. But we're not doing anything to stop it or preserve it on the federal level, and maybe not even on a state level in many states. What should Americans be doing right now to insulate themselves? Because it's really going to be, if we don't do it for ourselves, they're certainly not gonna. And we are going to be caught with our pants down flat-footed. And all of a sudden, we're going to wake up and our social credit score is not going to be good enough for us to go buy groceries that day. Or our digital currency is going to be programmed to such a degree that, well, we've got an egg shortage because of bird flu. So not only can you not buy eggs, but you can't buy any foods that eggs are a primary ingredient either. You don't think they'll program stuff like that? You don't think they will program your behavior and program your financial freedom? Come on, this is exactly what they want to do. And of course, if you're too expensive or if you're not a useful person, you all know a Harari, you might as well just, find your way out. Is there any protection? Is there any insulation that we can do on our own that you would encourage people to do?
Andrew, this has been a long road for us. Obviously, we've been on this for years now. The first thing that people have to do is they have to come to terms with the fact that this is really actually happening. If you're going to be an ostrich with your head in the sand, you may as well be a number on a casket. It's already over for you. You are, in essence, the Walking Dead. You have to get that real about this in order to survive what's coming. This is why gold backs and parallel economy items and communities are so important. When things go sideways, all economies instantly become local, and whatever the prevailing method is to exchange value is going to be that. If you prepare now, you prepare yourself, your family, and your community, you stand a better chance of some level of normalcy and not having to give into the system when this stuff goes down. Because let's be honest, it's going to go down in some form. You need to figure out how prepared you can be. And just as an aside, Andrew, you'll chuckle when you hear this. This is a really good time to bring up the B-roll movie from the 80s called They Live. Roddy Piper, the wrestler, was in this movie. But what's interesting about that is that when the glasses are put on and taken off in that movie, you can see what the invaders or the controllers are doing. And when they do it, there's this giant thing going in a circle saying, sleep, sleep, sleep. And it's music and talk, right? But then when he puts on the glasses, he can see that the newspaper says consume, and then the money says, this is your God. Right? People say, oh, that's a B-roll movie and a B-rated movie, whatever. That's real. You're there now, but you have to come to the reckoning that you are and think practically about what you're going to need to survive it.
Yeah. And if you don't believe we're there, just remember a few minutes ago when we gave you the receipts and the evidence that our own government, our own congressmen, our own senators gave themselves a loophole, so they're no longer bound by the Constitution when it comes to financial matters in this country. Why would they do that unless they know what they're doing here? One real quick thing before we go. I know with WatchmenAction.org, you're involved in the parallel currency world. I just want to give you an opportunity, let people know what they might find on your site with regard to parallel economy or parallel currency, because they may not know where else to go.
Andrew, it's great. If you go to WatchmenAction.org, the team at Goldback Inc. actually supports the work that we do in teaching people, and they've turned gold into money. So as Juliana says, they've made it fungible, which means it's usable and divisible. So you could work in denominations of goldback notes, much like you work in cash. They have a value. It's tied to gold. The goal with that is to get people in the habit of doing commerce in that way. Because, Andrew, all economies, whether it's our relationship doing this show, our relationship with the audience, doesn't matter. All economies are built on trust. If you trust that I give you this gold back, it's worth its weight in gold, so to speak, that you can get something else for it to exchange it, then you've got an economy that's robust. And gold and silver are God's money. Right? That has been a form of exchange and a store of value for thousands of years. And Goldback's now brought it into the modern age and made it easy for you to do stuff face to face. Andrew, I have to tell you how exciting it is. At ICFF, we gave away hundreds of these half Goldbacks to get people encouraged. And the team at Goldback was actually at Berkshire Hathaway's Investor Day speaking, Warren Buffett's company. They're speaking. They gave away 50,000 of them. So it's exciting to see that we're in a place now where we can start moving forward with parallel economies, and there's an easy way to exchange value.